parents, the child goes to the teacher who will guide that child.
What do you mean by external moral authority? You use that expression a lot.
Materialism has to do with when you are
Hello, a very warm welcome to our second episode of the course in values. I have in the studio with me Sister Denise, who will be taking us through the text, and I invite you to join us for this next half an hour to listen to what is proving to be a fascinating course. Sister Denise, it's great to have you back.
Thank you.
In today's episode, we will be looking at the methodology of the course. So, Sister Denise, there's a number of questions that I have in mind, and there's a number of questions I had in mind for the previous episode, but because of time factor, we couldn't go through all of them. The first question that I have for you is that you wrote the book between the years 2000 and 2006. If you were to write all of this today, will it be the same or will it be different?
Actually, I think it would be quite different. The whole process of not only preparing the books, but also teaching the course, which I did in a very experimental way in many different environments, from university professors to a very mixed international audience to people who had come to different countries as refugees, and so on, different styles of people. But also the world is a very different place now than it was all those few years ago. And I have also changed myself, because once you do a piece of work of this magnitude, it really starts creating huge shifts in your thinking, which is interesting because it shows a very dynamic and an organic type of course.
Is the didactic method and learning by rote the method you use as far as teaching is concerned?
Never.
Why not? That is the way that all of us were educated in most countries in the world.
Well, I never was.
Okay.
I was very lucky in my education because there were very few in the class. We had extremely well-educated teachers who were very competent and very focused. And in university we used the system known as seminar, which is you would have a class of about 6 or 7 and you'd really go carefully through the material. But learning by rote teaches a person not to think for themselves. So I really want people to think for themselves. You will present people. I don't think that regurgitating the material that's been put into you is a sign of intelligence or competence or anything. It's a very, very old way of pedagogy. But in terms of education today, it's really very collaborative, and a lot of attention is on the student discovering and uncovering and working with material, which is a very creative process. And the student is not there to be told you're right or you're wrong. It doesn't work like that. And even in terms of values and such ideas, you know, there are very different values in this world. And there may be a person with a particular background in a particular faith tradition, in a particular community of the world, whose values are diametrically opposed to someone in another part of the world. And who is to say one is right and one is wrong? So we're really moving away from this word right and wrong. Now, for a person to calculate whether something's right or wrong, there you go to the philosophy of karma.
I want to stop you there to ask you a further question. How then do you think this course should be taught? So Denise, as I listened to your previous answer, I remember when I was in school, I had this teacher who said, if you look at the Latin definition of education, duco means to lead from within. So an education means to lead, the teacher's job is to lead the student from within.
Yes.
I like that definition, but one sees very little evidence of this in the world. So my question to you is, how should this course be taught?
The way I teach it, I don't know if that's the best way, but for me it's the best way. You look at the material. First of all, what I find with a lot of people is they don't read the material. They look at the words on the page, maybe scan it, but it doesn't go in. So in order for something to go in, you have to really look at it carefully. And the kind of discussion that you and I are having, where we may zoom in on a particular sentence or something and say to each other, okay, well now, what does this really mean? And what does it mean to you? I am not really looking at the thing objectively, but very much subjectively. Because the key ingredient for me is to awaken conscience. And I have formed the conclusion that people who do actions against their conscience regularly over the course of their whole life cause their conscience to lose functionality completely, which means that you cannot rely on the most important and valuable instrument that you have within your consciousness. You're then forced to refer to other people who will tell you their idea of what you should be doing, which may or may not be in your best interest. It's usually be in their best interest. And the assumption that people are altruistic is a dream. They aren't. You cannot be, because of the nature of human consciousness, you see. So there are many assumptions people have, which if you examine those assumptions, is it true? It may be that everybody believes it's true, but is it really true? You have to check it against different criteria. And if you find that something you have believed to be true for your whole life and many generations turns out not to be true, then you have to decide, do you want to carry on with it, or do you want to discard it and go for what is true? It's a bit like the idea of the earth being flat. Once people realize that it's not flat, there's no point trying to pretend it is, because we know that it isn't. So teaching the course, I think, has to be done by conversation, by applying the ideas in an experimental way in your life, in your family. And this is really what was happening. You know, the first group I taught were a group of lecturers in South Gujarat University. And so they were well educated, but not in this. And their mentality on the whole was based in the traditional ideas that were handed down through the generations. And so when we're looking at some of the principles described in this course, you have a clash of values. And then each person had to decide for themselves how they're going to handle that. And that may involve compromise and going for some things, not for others. One of the important things that did come through and does come through is that each and every situation has to be examined on its own merits. And you cannot say that, well, a similar situation happened 10 years ago, therefore the current situation should be analyzed in the same way. No, there are variables that are not the same. It may be similar, but once you factor in the variables, everything has to be looked at uniquely. And as you move through life, your values change, your priorities change. Life for a small child is very different life from a retired person, and consequently the values are different, the priorities are different. So you have to bring in the subjective element, and everyone's thinking. Some people are very liberal, some people are very traditional, some people are rigid, some people are very emotional, some people are very, logical. And you have to understand yourself.
Sister Denise, do you remember that we did values, virtues, ethics and morality, and we used the Socratic dialogue? I remember a medical student telling me that that is the cornerstone of medical science. Okay, why don't you use that method, since it's tried, tested and found to be of greatest effect?
I do, but I don't use only that method. I use many different methods, because again, you have many different kinds of people, and everyone learns differently and understands things more quickly, more slowly. There are many variables involved in this, and so you have to, in a sense, look at real life situations, though you're in maybe a classroom situation, but you create a very good interface and a smooth transition between the theoretical and the practical, and you're always shifting from the one to the other. I use the dialogue system a great deal, because people's opinions need to be voiced, and you need to hear your opinion on a particular subject in the light of 20 other people's opinions. Because there you see that there are you have a majority who have a similar opinion, a minority, few minorities who have other opinions, and in the process of sharing opinion, people may well shift their opinion, and it's a very dynamic, live educational process, not at all rigid, and this is why exams really don't work. Because an exam tests you on whether you can spill out what was poured in. This is not like that.
Okay, so how do you evaluate students of this course? Do you evaluate them, or do they evaluate themselves?
I very much strongly encourage people to evaluate themselves and to work together and evaluate each other. You see?
What came to mind is that life evaluates you by sending you exams.
It does. And you have daily exams which you have to deal with, and the way that your situation turns out afterwards, when you analyze it and see what you did, what worked, what didn't work, that is going to inform your personal ethical policy about how you move yourself forward.
Now, Sister Denise, as I went through the text, it's quite obvious that you keep making reference to India. Did you write the series for only students of India? If somebody from the United States or Ethiopia or Australia is interested in this course, what's in it for them?
Well, it was asked for by India for India. But in the process of writing, I found that there are most matters of value move towards the universal. And while I wouldn't say there's anything like universal values, there are universal principles. And the philosophy of karma comes in this a great deal. And the laws of karma are pretty much like the laws of physics. You don't invent them, you discover them. So it really applies to anyone. India is a very traditional society. It's a very rich and varied society. So I think that people of the various different other cultures and other religious traditions, faith traditions, who are working with this will find many things, if not everything, will relate to their personal situation. So I don't think that having written it for India actually limits it.
Tell us what the consequences are of using the dialogue method. Why this particular form of learning? Why does it appeal to you?
The reason is very important because the system of dialogue that I use, it's a very specific system that was invented by David Bohm in the 1980s. And what he said, and what I found to be true, is that there is a true answer or a truth that can be brought to the surface for any question that you want to take up. And when you have dialogue, you're going around listening to what is said by the different members of the group. And everybody has to speak, and they have to follow certain rules. They must use true statements. You cannot arrive at truth through falsehood. It's not possible. Many people in India, they will teach values through hypothetical anecdotes. And I made a rule that you cannot use that, because anything that you make it up, anything you make up, is false. If you want to tell a story, it has to be true.
So by true you mean fact-based?
Fact-based. Otherwise people say, well, suppose there is a green elephant crossing the road and it goes against the red light, what would you do? And I would say, well, first of all, there's no green elephant crossing the light. Why are we talking about something which doesn't exist? We must talk about something that's real, that actually exists. And the problem that I found for India is it deals in hypothetical examples. And when I say to a person, no, tell me the truth, there's a great reluctance, because the whole tradition of education in morality is all about hypothetical examples. And there is a gut reaction that if I tell the truth, it won't look good. And my response is, I don't worry about whether it looks good or not. What I'm concerned with is, do you know how to think through real situations?
How do you know that the dialogue method works? Where's your proof?
There is something called the ring of truth. Have you heard of that? So what we found collectively, a kind of phenomenon occurs that when someone in the group says something that really is the truth, everybody will feel it. And they will immediately say, yes, that's it. And it's intuitive. And once the truth of that particular discussion is stated, it could be by anyone. Could be the facilitator, could be one of the people, doesn't matter where it comes from. People say, yes, that's it. The other thing is they stop talking, because you need to savor that so that you can commit it to memory. Because whenever a true statement comes, it negates pre-existing false statements about that have lived because people have gone along with it, until the true statement comes. When the true statement comes and people savor it and feel it, they no longer can work with the false statement. So there's a shift that takes place. Then everybody goes and applies it in their daily life, and then you come back to the discussion. So it's very dynamic, and also people find, and they say, when we did it this way, we were successful in our exchanges and our interactions. So I suppose the proof is that in practical situations, it works.
As I went through this entire course, the one thing that struck me is your optimism about humanity. You invested all of your intellect and energy into these texts so that you can help people bring out the best in themselves as far as values are concerned. What I want to know is, how is it that you have such hope in humanity despite so much evidence to the contrary? Many have written humanity off as being beyond redemption. And you are writing Values in Education and actively speaking about it in the year 2016. You believe something in humanity that's no longer visible. How you be able to do this? Why are you doing it?
You know, if you have an empty glass of water where there's no water in it,
Yeah.
you put water in it, then it's a glass of water.
Yes.
You know, if you just say, oh, this is an empty glass of water, there's no water in it, it's so bad, this is the problem. My optimism comes from my espousal of this principle that every human being is fundamentally pure, peaceful, powerful, loveful, blissful, and clear and wise, and that over time all of these qualities in the human spirit have got used up. And when something is old, worn out and used, and you call it bad, that's not the solution. If something is empty, you fill it. How will you drive your car on an empty tank of gasoline? It's not possible. You want to drive your car, you put the necessary fluids in, and then it'll run fine. If you condemn the car because it doesn't have any petrol in it, that doesn't make any sense to me. But this is the way people have been viewing humanity, saying that humanity is bad, or whatever. But I say they're depleted. And there is a source, which I call God, that you can connect to fill yourself up with, and that is all that has to be done. You need to fill, and you need a certain amount of instructions of how to fill, how to maintain, and what the laws of karma are, and then, you know, you can run just fine.
Understanding the material, talking about it is one thing. How do you ensure, if you do ensure, that the students of the Course in Values are implementing this into their lives? That is the proof of the pudding is in the eating, isn't it?
I don't think it's up to me to ensure that they're doing it, because that would again be this enforcement. And I'm not in favor of morality by enforcement, because enforcement means violence, and violence is antagonistic to the human spirit. So no. What I prefer is to inspire and to be an example. And I find that people, you know, they're up for it.
What is the impact of your inspiration and example? How do you do that?
I'll give you a little story about that. I used to teach meditation in the prison system in Los Angeles to people who were there for drug-related crimes, and you're aware about such an environment because that's your professional background. I was once in a shop buying a washing machine for the center, and these two enormous, highly tattooed black guys come barreling over towards me and my colleague. Sister, you changed our lives, you know, and we're out there and we're functioning. And to me, you know, those are really the proofs. When somebody who, you see, when you're in incarcerated and you're in the system of what you call it, incarceration and everything, the problem is the people are considered bad. They're called criminals. They're told you don't have a chance, you can't get a job ever because you're dishonest people, and so on and so forth. But my way of interacting was, hello brother, you're a pure, peaceful, powerful, loveful, blissful soul like me, you know, let's let's do some filling up of the soul with some of these qualities, and let's talk about stuff that's of interest. And when you talk to a person as if they are a good person, they start becoming that. And there's a spiritual law in India which is very interesting, and that is the way that you look at a person, that's how they become, because your view of them makes them how they are. So when you view somebody as bad, they become bad.
I think we better stop there, because that's a very powerful note on which to end today's talk. So there you go. Today we covered the methodology of the course, and Sister Denise has shared with us the impact and the power of dialoguing, why she uses certain methods of teaching like dialoguing, and why she doesn't believe in the didactic method of teaching. Very interesting and fresh perspective. And what I like about it is Sister Denise's belief and understanding that every one of us are good, and just because the soul has become spiritually empty doesn't mean that we have to write ourselves off. I think that's the best part of what I took from today's episode, that through spirituality you repair yourself, you do not write yourself off. That is the message. So I do hope that you enjoyed this half an hour with us, and I do hope that you are sitting and waiting with bated breath for the next episode. I know I am. And in the next episode we will go through the context of chapter 1, and we'll see how Sister Denise goes into the depths of what values are, and how she understands it, and how she imparts her understanding to us. So thank you so much for joining us, Sister Denise, today, and thank you so much for joining us. I hope to see you soon for the next episode. Take care and goodbye.